Holy Gospel is written in the 12th chapter of St. Luke, beginning at the 49th verse. Jesus said, I come to bring fire to the earth, and how I wish it were there already kindled. I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and what stress I am under until it is completed. Do you think that I've come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. He also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you immediately say, it's going to rain, and so it happens. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, there will be scorching heat, and it happens. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and sky, but what you do not know is how to interpret the present time. Here ends the gospel for the day. Please be seated. Without raising your hand, I'm going to ask you how many of you have recently or in the last couple of years attended a class reunion. They are interesting events. They get more and more interesting as you grow older and older. And one of the things that I discovered is that there are awkward moments at class reunions. For instance, I was talking to one of my classmates, and I looked at her and I said, well, where is your husband? And she said, well, he's right here. And this is somebody who was in my class that I went to school with, that I saw last year. It was an awkward moment because I simply just didn't remember the face and couldn't associate it with his name. I was involved in other awkward moments this past couple of weeks. First of all, going back to the church that I served and coming there and preaching and knowing that there were others there who had been part of the clergy in the past, and they weren't allowed to give anything. They weren't allowed to present anything, which I couldn't quite understand. But it certainly was an awkward moment. But the most interesting awkward moment, as I reflect back on it, shouldn't have been an awkward moment at all. I went to visit a couple who I knew in Hawaii who come to Alexandria, Minnesota during the summer. And I went out with them to eat. They are very dedicated Christians. And when we went into this big eating place with a huge buffet with a lot of people there, they said, well, do you want to say the grace or should we? And I said, well, why don't you? And they said, okay. And so they said, okay, let's cue the music. And they started hitting a certain note that they were going to sing the table prayer with. And then they sang the table prayer. And I looked around. I was very, very uncomfortable because people were looking at us. What kind of people are these that sing the table grace in a cafeteria filled with people? I guess it is so common with them to do that they don't think of it as anything peculiar. It is not imposing upon somebody else. It is simply doing what they should be doing. We have these awkward moments. And very often in our faith, we have awkward moments. But the interesting thing about the awkward moments is that if we think about them, it might lead us to come to some conclusions about how possibly our witness could be more effective to others. All too often, we like to pacify others by restricting what we feel is important to ourselves. Have you ever heard awkward moments? When you sat down to pray and a minister asked you to pray instead? Isn't that an awkward moment? You ever taken a test where the only answer that you knew was the answer to what's your name? Have you ever been laughing when everybody else is serious? Somebody told something that was very important and very dear to their heart, and you thought it was funny and they were all serious and almost crying and you were laughing? You ever said goodbye to someone and then started walking in the same direction together? I think that maybe we should think about awkward moments. And as I was thinking about these awkward moments that seem to blend in so much to the gospel text today. Did you notice that? Gospel text? Jesus says to his disciples, I come to bring fire to the earth, and how I wish it was already kindled. I have a baptism of which to be baptized, and what stress I am under until it is completed. Yes, Jesus had stress in his life, believe it or not. Do you think that I came to bring peace to the earth? Wasn't this the guy that was talking about peace and everybody getting along all the time? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, households will be divided. I'm sure this was a very awkward moment for the apostles. This is the person that they had followed that had told them how to bring peace to the earth. But Jesus is not saying this without knowing what he's doing. It is to call their attention that the world that they live in is different than the world that he is a part of. And the values are different about this world and God's world. Sometimes it is those awkward moments that could call us to recognize significant things in our lives and between us and our God. If you notice, commercials now very often are ending with awkward moments. The Sonic commercials almost always end with some kind of awkward statement made at the end. Progressive Insurance uses the awkward moments as a way to sell. In Rob Lowe, there's when DirecTV is advertising, you first have Rob Lowe coming saying, I'm Rob Lowe, and he's all dressed out in fine garb, looking very sharp. The actor that he is recognized almost every place. And I have DirecTV. And then there's a shot to a Rob Lowe that's disheveled. His hair is all greasy. He's in a lousy pants. And he says, I'm the awkward Rob Lowe. I have cable. Advertisers say that's what we do now. It takes the edge off. It's a little geeky. It's anti-elitist. It is memorable in its otherness. Certainly the politicians know what it is to be put in awkward situations. But one of the things that happens when the politicians are put in awkward situations by the questions they are asked, they go home and study them and go over them with their aides, so the next time they are asked, they can respond very, very freely and openly as if they know exactly what the answers to those problems are, so they don't have those awkward moments anymore. So that when I ask you to consider this morning this question, when was my last awkward moment in terms of my faith? When was my last awkward moment in terms of confronting God with something in my life? What was it that made me uneasy and that maybe I'm really not in keeping with what I say my faith is? Because it is those awkward moments that will lead you to an understanding that you need constantly to examine your faith. And if something makes you feel uncomfortable, maybe it's because you have a conscience and because you have a God-directed center. What are the things that can make you uncomfortable and feel awkward? Very often, if I speak the truth in love, if I come to somebody who has a difficulty and is causing a lot of problems, or is doing something destructive in their own lives, is it right to speak to them about it, even though it makes us both feel awkward? And usually the answer is yes, because unless somebody speaks and puts somebody in an awkward position, there is no possibility for self-examination. So, if I speak to somebody and I attack some of the defenses they use for inappropriate behavior, it is not attacking them, but some of the defenses that they have to act improperly in terms of their Christian faith. Another thing that can make us feel awkward is when we pay too much attention to the coming of God's kingdom. Jesus criticizes the Pharisees in the text this morning. And he said, you seem to be able to predict the weather all right. When you have this kind of condition, you say this is what's going to happen. When you talk about this kind of condition, something else is going to happen. And you seem to be able to interpret the weather all right. I guess they had better weather reporters than we do. But nevertheless, you don't talk about the kingdom very much, and the fact that God's kingdom is coming. Maybe there should be a constant reminder to other people that the kingdom is coming, and there is going to be God's recollection of all people and an examination of what your life has been. There are other awkward moments that you can create in your life in terms of your spiritual life. If you ask someone to offer forgiveness, that can be very awkward. To ask them to let go of a grudge, especially a long-standing grudge, that can be very awkward, but is Christian. To ask them to accept a volunteer assignment, it might be awkward because it'll take their time and commitment, and they didn't really intend to spend the time in the beginning. Maybe to ask them to sit by a newcomer at a luncheon rather than just with the old crowd. It can make you uncomfortable, but you can learn about a new human being and another fellow traveler in your faith. Maybe it would be awkward when you ask to share your faith with someone, but it could be the most tremendous, valuable thing that would happen in your life, because somehow you might ignite the Spirit of Christ in another person's life. That text this morning is a very awkward one. Doesn't sound like Jesus at all. But maybe it takes something as forceful as that to understand that sometimes in your lifetime as a Christian, times aren't going to be easy. Sometimes people are just plain going to be upset with you because of your Christianity. But it is that awkwardness that calls you to examine your life and to make that life better. God bless the awkward moments in your life. It just might be a better understanding of you and others and God's purpose for your life. Amen.